Trial resumed. Jury not present.
The court said, "Good morning. Please make your appearances."
Mr. Finkel said, "Good morning, Your Honor." Ryan Finkel, Juliana Murray, Micah Ferguson, Justin Horton, who is on his way up, and feedback, for the government. We're joined by Isabel Loftus, who is a paralegal in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and Special Agent Robert Stout of the FBI.
Mr. Kamraju said, "Good morning, Your Honor." Sid Kamraju and Sabrina Shroff, on behalf of Mr. Gov't. And Mr. Gov't is here with us at counsel table.
Ms. Shrofa said, "Good morning, Your Honor."
The court said, "Please be seated." Yesterday the court heard testimony from Steele Schottenheimer, the Managing Director for Investor Relations at Hayman Capital Management. The government seeks to elicit from Ms. Schottenheimer testimony as to whether an investment in Hayman Capital's Hong Kong Opportunities Fund could have a negative impact on the Chinese Communist Party and be a means to fight the CCP, or whether such an investment is merely a bet on how the macroeconomic environment will perform. That was from the government's letter at ECF number 369. Under Rule 701, a lay witness may offer opinion testimony only to the extent that it is rationally based on the witness's perception, helpful to clearly understand the witness's testimony or to determine a fact and issue, and not based on scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge within the scope of Rule 702. The parties have found some common ground in their letters. The government argues that based on her personal experience as a Hayman Capital Managing Director, Ms. Schottenheimer should be permitted to testify that Hayman does not represent that investing in something like the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunity Fund would help bring about the event that is being bid on. Government letter at 4. The defense agrees that Ms. Schottenheimer can testify about whether she marketed the fund as a tool to take down the CCP. Defendant's letter at 4. ECF number 370. Testimony about how Hayman marketed the Hong Kong Opportunity Fund to Gov't does not require Ms. Schottenheimer to offer an opinion. Accordingly, Ms. Schottenheimer may testify as to how she marketed the fund in promotional material, such as the slide deck which was admitted into evidence, and in conversations with the defendant and other relevant individuals. The government may elicit, for example, that Hayman advertised the fund merely as a bet on the performance of the Hong Kong dollar. These representations would be relevant to the defendant's state of mind in deciding whether to invest in the fund. However, I will not permit the government to ask Ms. Schottenheimer to speculate about whether an investment in the fund would have a negative impact on the Chinese Communist Party. That question asks for an opinion that goes beyond her work at Hayman Capital. It asks her to opine on whether a short position on a foreign currency could have an impact on a foreign government. This is beyond the ken of a person with industry experience like Ms. Schottenheimer. It is also far less relevant than marketing-related evidence because it does not directly bear on the defendant's state of mind. Accordingly, the government shall not elicit general testimony about the impact of the fund on the broader economy. I'm told that we're still waiting for one of the jurors because the Lexington Avenue subway line apparently is stuck. There may be some sort of a crisis related to someone on the tracks. Is there anything else that you'd like to raise?
Mr. Kamraju said, "Not from the defense, Your Honor."
Mr. Finkel said, "Your Honor, I just want to make sure I don't run afoul of the court's ruling. I plan to ask Ms. Schottenheimer, consistent with what I understand the ruling to be, about marketing and how the HHKOF was represented to investors. I believe I can also ask her what the HHKOF is a bet on, which is to say what it is, and that, in large part, has come in. I think she can also testify about her personal observations about whether, after the HHKOF was made available to the public in 2017, the CCP has fallen. She has personal observations of that. That is not expert testimony. I just want to make sure all that is in accord with Your Honor's ruling. And with respect to the sort of whether the opinion about if it even is an opinion about the impact of the bet on the CCP, Your Honor. In some sense, I think this is what I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to get this with Ms. Schottenheimer, is if you bet on the Met game. Right, and the Mets win, which I hope they do, but they don't a lot, you make money. But betting on the Met game doesn't make the Mets win or lose, right? It's just a bet on an outcome. And I think the concept, which she knows based on her personal knowledge, not based on any study she's done, not based on any work she's done as an expert or anything like that. She's not an expert. She's just an employee of the company. Those sorts of questions about investing and betting, frankly, because that's what the investment is. I don't think that runs afoul of your Honor's ruling, and I just want to ensure that I don't do that.
Mr. Kamraju said, "Thank you, Your Honor. So I think the testimony that Mr. Finkel is trying to elicit or that he refers to at the end is actually precisely expert testimony. And we submitted an example of that from a trial that was held here in this courthouse, United States versus Phillips, which was about a market manipulation theory related to the South African rand. And the government submitted an expert disclosure concerning an expert witness that they intended to call talking about the influence of trading patterns on the underlying currency, how it would impact it, and how ultimately that would affect the economy in South Africa. So the idea that Ms. Schottenheimer can sort of facilely say, well, if you're just making a bet on the currency, it's not going to affect anything underlying. It's nothing more than a way to backdoor in the prior testimony that Your Honor has just excluded. With respect to whether she can testify as to whether the CCP has fallen, first of all, I'm not sure what her personal observations about that fact are relevant to. But I'm also not sure that she has the knowledge base to say one way or the other whether the CCP has been damaged or harmed or hurt in any way. The fund is still working. So to me, what Mr. Finkel has sort of advocated for is just another way to backdoor into the same opinions that Your Honor has now just precluded.
Mr. Finkel said, "So, Your Honor, the difference between Ms. Schottenheimer and the Phillips case is Ms. Schottenheimer has personal experience, personal knowledge. She's a percipient witness. She works at Hayman Capital. The expert the government sought to introduce at Phillips is none of those things. He looked at the evidence and made an assessment about the evidence. Ms. Schottenheimer would be testifying not about her opinion, but about her personal observations, her percipient knowledge of events, how the trade works. She tells people about that. That's her job. And so I think that's an important distinction between what defense counsel is discussing and what Ms. Schottenheimer would testify about."
The court said, "So I understand the questions that you'd like to elicit. Would this investment have an impact on the government, and did it have an impact, or did the government fall as a result of this investment? Am I correct?"
Mr. Finkel said, "That is one question, Your Honor. I think another question, which I can't envision how it's in any way 701 or 702, is what is the size of the HHKOF, right? Which is the total position that the HHKOF has taken over time. She knows that from her work. That's not an expert analysis. That's her knowledge."
The court said, "That's a matter of fact."
Mr. Finkel said, "Exactly. And so that's all I'm saying, Your Honor. Just to be clear, I'm not trying to relitigate Your Honor's ruling, the court's ruling. I just don't want to have sidebars, and make sure I stay within the lanes that Your Honor established. And that's what I intend to do, is elicit facts about what she knows, what she's seen, what she's experienced. And then she'll be free to be crossed on it."
The court said, "So asking about the size of the position is fine. But asking whether this investment would have an impact on the Chinese economy, that is prohibited. And asking whether it did cause an impact or cause the Chinese Communist Party to fall, that is also prohibited."
Mr. Finkel said, "Understood, Your Honor." "Okay. Understood."
The court said, "Anything further?"
Mr. Kamraju said, "Not from us, Your Honor."
Mr. Finkel said, "Just two things. Defense counsel and the government have discussed I'm going to provide Ms. Schottenheimer a binder. It has a number of documents in it. We've identified the documents for defense counsel as at least to one of those documents. The defense is going to ask for a limiting instruction because it's an email that Gov't sent to William J.E. And it's being offered for the effect on William J.E., not for its truth. The government has no objection to such an instruction. And I guess we can ask for it when that document comes up.
Mr. Kamraju said, "That's fine with us, Your Honor."
Mr. Finkel said, and then last piece, Your Honor, and just in an abundance of caution. I know the court instructed the jury about this during preliminary instructions. The government would just request that in the sort of daily admonishment to the jurors not to discuss the case. Your Honor, also tell them not to do research on the case, or follow any news about it. I know that's sort of already out there. But the government would appreciate if Your Honor would do that from time to time.
The court said, okay.
Mr. Finkel said, thank you.
The court said, I'd like the government to provide me with hard copies of the stipulations, please.
Mr. Finkel said, absolutely. They are being printed now, Your Honor, and we'll have them shortly.
Recess.
The court said, I'm told that all the jurors are now here. Is there something, Mr. Kamraju, that you wanted to put on the record?
Mr. Kamraju said, yes, it's very minor. I've already spoken with the government about it. I just wanted the court to be aware that when one of the jurors arrived, they accidentally wandered into the room that the defense team is using. They saw us, expressed surprised, turned around, and walked away. Nobody said anything to the juror, but I just wanted the court to know. I've spoken with the government. I don't think there's anything to be done about it.
The court said, all righty then. Please have the jurors come in.
Mr. Finkel said, should the witness take the stand?
The court said, and the witness should take the stand, yes.
Jury present.
The court said, please be seated. Good morning, jurors.
The jury said, good morning.
The court said, we're going to continue with the direct examination of Ms. Schottenheimer. And I remind you that you're still under oath. You may inquire.
Mr. Finkel said, thank you, Your Honor.
Steele Schottenheimer, called as a witness by the government, having been previously duly sworn, testified as follows. Direct examination. Continued. By Mr. Finkel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Schottenheimer, you were speaking yesterday a bit about the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund. Is there a shorthand name that Hayman uses for the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund?
HKOF.
And how do you spell that?
HHKOF.
So if I refer to it as the HHKOF, you'll understand I'm referring to the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund?
Yes.
The court said, Mr. Finkel, I'm going to need you to come closer to the microphone.
Mr. Finkel said, yes, Your Honor. When an investor invests in the HHKOF share Class A, what event needs to happen for that investment to pay off, for the bet to win?
There would need to be a devaluation, or a stress to the Hong Kong dollar.
And how significant of a devaluation or stress to the Hong Kong dollar would be required for a bet on the HHKOF to pay off?
Even 1 cent outside of the band, the fund would be technically in the money. But the more drastic the devaluation or stress, the more money the fund would make.
So if the peg breaks, the Hong Kong dollar/U.S. dollar peg breaks, would the HHKOF pay off?
Yes.
The court said, one moment. Can you explain in very simple terms how this works?
The witness said, yes. So the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund is short the Hong Kong dollar. And so the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar. And so if the Hong Kong dollar were to devalue against the US dollar, then our fund would make money.
The court said, but what do you mean by short?
The witness said, you can be long a currency and you can be short a currency, meaning you can be positioned to make money on the long side if the currency were to strengthen, and you could make money on the short side being short the currency if the currency were to go down in value.
The court said, "Can you give an example using numbers?"
The witness said, "Absolutely. So the Hayman Hong Kong dollar, for example, the weak side of the band is 7.85, $7.85 per Hong Kong dollar to the US dollar. If the Hong Kong dollar were to devalue to 10 Hong Kong dollars to US dollars, even though it's increasing, it's actually devaluing because it takes more Hong Kong dollars to make a US dollar. So if you were to be short the Hong Kong dollar and it were to trade outside the band $7.85 Hong Kong dollars per US dollars, then you would make the delta or the difference between 7.85 and $10.
Thank you. So if someone is shorting a currency, the bet they're making is anticipating the currency will drop in value?
Drop in value versus another currency. In the case of the Hong Kong dollar, because it is pegged to the US dollar, that is the metric.
So if the Hong Kong dollar drops outside of the band, if the peg breaks, the value of the Hong Kong dollar would drop and the HHKOF would pay off, correct?
Correct.
Now, that was share class A. Let's talk about share class B, the prodigious series. What event, if any, needs to occur for share class B, the prodigious series, for that bet to pay off?
It's the outcome, the input, meaning the devaluation of the Hong Kong dollar, it's the same. It was just more, the exposure in share class B is more significant, so the outcome is more severe.
So again, if the band or peg breaks, then share class B would pay off?
Correct.
Since the
breaks to the weak side.
Since the HHKOF has been offered for sale, has the peg broken?
No, it has not.
And when Hayman markets this HHKOF investment to investors, what you just explained, how the bet will pay off, is that consistent with Hayman's marketing materials?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, "Your Honor, may I approach the witness?"
The court said you may.
Mr. Finkel said, handing Ms. Schottenheimer a binder with a variety of documents, including the following: GXHN 26, 29, 35, 41, 57, 59, 69, 70, 71, 79, 80, 82, 86, 98, 124, 168, 193, 208, 220, 221, 222, 223. Ms. Schottenheimer, can you flip through the binder and let me know if you recognize the documents inside of it? Mr. Finkel said, "For the record, those numbers are all GXHN prefixes."
I have flipped through the binder.
Ms. Schottenheimer, have you seen that binder before?
Yes.
And how do you recognize that you've seen it before?
I reviewed this binder a couple days ago, when I was with the Assistant U.S. Attorney Office.
And who asked you to review the contents of that binder?
You did.
And who picked the contents of that binder?
I believe you did.
And what, just at a very high level, is in that binder?
It's email correspondence between myself and William J.E. Email correspondence between William J.E. and Kyle. Email correspondence between Steve Bannon and Kyle. There's different versions of the Soraka subscription booklet subscribing to the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund. There's a Hamilton subscription booklet in here as well. There's also some wire details. Evidence of wires that have occurred, as well as the side letter between Soraka, Hamilton, and the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund.
And Ms. Schottenheimer, the emails that you sent or received, are those fair and accurate copies of emails you sent or received?
Yes.
And what is Global Relay?
Global Relay is a third-party service that Hayman Capital Management uses to capture required emails and store them for up to 5 years.
And why does Hayman store its emails for up to 5 years?
We are required to buy the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And with respect to the emails that you mentioned that you're not on, what steps, if any, did you take concerning those documents in the global relay system?
I connected with Hayman's Chief Compliance Officer, Stu Smith. We set up a Teams call so I could view his screen. I do not have access, as investor relations, to the global relay. However, he does as the Chief Compliance Officer. And so he logged into Global Relay and searched for these specific emails. And I was able to verify that they were sent to Hayman's server and captured by Global Relay.
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, at this time the government offers GXHN 26, 29, 35, 41, 57, 59, 69, 70, 71, 79, 80, 82, 86, 98, 124, 168, 193, 208, 220, 221, 222, and 223.
The court said, "No objection?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "No objection to their admission, Your Honor. Subject to the court giving a limiting instruction with respect to GHN 208 at the appropriate time."
The court said, "All right, so you'll indicate when that happens."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Yes, Your Honor."
The court said, "Okay, go ahead."
Mr. Finkel said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
Government's exhibits HN 26, HN 29, HN 35, HN 41, HN 57, HN 59, HN 69, HN 70, HN 71, HN 79, HN 80, HN 82, HN 86, HN 98, HN 124, HN 168, HN 193, HN 208, HN 220, HN 221, HN 222, HN 223 received in evidence. By Mr. Finkel.
Ms. Schottenheimer, how long has the HHKOF been offered to the marketplace for?
January of 2017.
And since that time, has the Hong Kong dollar peg broken?
It has not.
Is the peg still in place today?
The band is still in place today, yes.
Mr. Finkel said, "Okay. If we can pull up, please, what's in evidence as Government Exhibit HN 29? Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this document?"
This is an email that I sent to all prospective investors that had indicated an interest in participating in the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Onshore Fund for Share Class B. The Prodigious Series. I sent it on Sunday, May 24th. We had just received the offering documents from outside counsel. And I was distributing it to all interested parties.
Ms. Schottenheimer, you said onshore. Can you explain to the jury what you mean by onshore?
So the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund has two feeder funds, an onshore feeder fund for taxable U.S. investors, and an offshore feeder fund for U.S. tax-exempt investors and offshore investors. These are, I guess, kind of tax it so investors, you know, get the appropriate tax documentation when they invest in our fund.
Mr. Finkel said, "Ms. Loftus, can you zoom out of that and zoom in on the top of the document, please?" Ms. Schottenheimer, do you recognize this email address?
Yes.
And whose email address is that?
William J.
Could you read the email address, please?
william.je@acacap.com.
Ms. Schottenheimer, why did you send this documentation about the Hong Kong Opportunities Fund Share Class B, the Prodigious Series, to Mr. J.E.?
At that point I was under the impression that William was interested in reviewing both the onshore and the offshore offering documents for the fund.
Mr. Finkel said, "You can zoom out of that, please, Ms. Loftus, and go to page 3 of this document." Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this, page 3 of HN 29?
This is our AML, or Anti-Money Laundering Information Grid.
And the second row says, private corporation/limited liability companies. Can you explain to the jury the purpose of that row on this document?
Yes. We have all different types of limited partners that come and invest in our fund in all different types of structures. Sometimes it's as an individual, sometimes it's as a limited partnership. Sometimes it's as an LLC. And the row that you're inquiring about is, you said the LLC.
Private corporation/limited liability companies, is that?
Yes, private corporation and limited liabilities, yes.
In the second check mark it says, beneficial owners, 25% or more interest, CCIP requirements. What does that mean?
So we are required to do a look-through of the entity to understand who the beneficial owner of the entity is.
Mr. Finkel said, go to page 5 of this document, please, Ms. Loftus. And Ms. Schottenheimer, do you see where it says, ultimate beneficial owner, above that chart?
Yes.
Can you read what that says?
Where no beneficial ownership information is provided, it will be assumed no beneficial owner holds 25% or more of the assets of the entity. In cases where the investing entity is performing AML due diligence on the underlying beneficial owner, an eligible introducer letter or equivalent certification letter can be provided in lieu of providing the details above.
Mr. Finkel said, can we zoom out of that, please, Ms. Loftus? The chart below that, what is that for?
Those are 4 of the 5, that's outlining 4 of the 5 items that we are required to collect on any beneficial owner owning more than 25% of any entity.
And what is an ultimate beneficial owner?
It's the person who owns the entity.
Mr. Finkel said, if we can go, please, to page 9 of this document. Can you zoom in at number 10, Ms. Loftus, please? Right there is fine. Here, underneath where it says payment and a Citibank bank account, what's that?
That is the account, that is the banking account for Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Onshore Fund. This is where investors send their capital, that they are subscribing to the entity.
And so if an investor wants to invest in the onshore fund, they send their money to a Citibank account which ends in 9681. Is that right?
That is correct.
Mr. Finkel said, we can go, please, to page 44. Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this part of the documents for?
This is the accredited investor status. So we are required for anyone who is subscribing to the fund to get verification that they are, in fact, an accredited investor.
Mr. Finkel said, and if we can please go to the next page or, sorry, page 46. At the bottom it says, qualified purchaser status. What's that?
This section of the document.
Yes.
This section of the document is where we are collecting the qualified purchaser representation from the investor. As discussed yesterday, all of our investors are required to be qualified purchasers.
Ms. Schottenheimer, what is a sub-doc?
A subscription document is the legal paperwork that an investor completes in order to subscribe to our vehicle.
And this document that we're looking at with the jury, is that a sub-doc?
Yes.
For what?
The Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Onshore Fund.
Mr. Finkel said, Ms. Loftus, we can take that down. And if we can display for the witness, please, HN33, just the witness. Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this document?
This is a text message from Kyle Bass to myself.
And the top text message, who is that text message from?
The top text message is, I believe, a cut and paste from William to Kyle that he is then cut and paste to myself, explaining what entities are investing in the Hong Kong Fund.
Mr. Finkel said, government offers HN33.
Mr. Kamarju said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit HN33 received in evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, publish that, please. Ms. Schottenheimer, now that the jury can see it, can you read the first text message, which was the cut and paste from William J.E.?
Correct. Because of tight timing, the entities to invest into your fund onshore U.S. Soraka Media Group Incorporated. Number 2, offshore, Hamilton Investment Management Limited. We can fill in all the details later. Thanks.
And what do you say in response to that?
I'm asking Kyle if the text message is from William.
And what is Kyle's response to you after you ask if it's from William?
Steele, these are the two entities that William and Miles will be investing through.
And what is your understanding of who Miles refers to?
Miles Kwok.
At this time, on May 26, 2020, when you received this text message, what was your understanding of what Soraka Media Group Incorporated was?
I had no understanding. It was just the name of an entity.
In your work at Hayman, is it unusual for an individual to invest in a Hayman financial product through an entity as opposed to their own individual self?
Not unusual.
And why is that?
Because a lot of wealthy individuals use entities for their family limited partnerships. For their business purposes. It's just their preference.
So here it says Soraka Media Group Incorporated. Did you have an understanding at this time, May 2020, whether Soraka Media Group Incorporated was a media company?
No, I did not.
What was your understanding about what Soraka Media Group did at this time?
Just at this pinpoint with the text message. I hadn't considered it. I was looking to collect the names to get checks with our external counsel to see if they could help enlist the side letter.
Mr. Finkel said, we can go, please, to HN35, which is in evidence. 35, please, Ms. Loftus. You can scroll down, please, to page 2. And if you can zoom in on that email on Tuesday, May 26th. Ms. Schottenheimer, this email that you sent to William J.E., copying Mr. Bass. What is the purpose of this email?
Now that I had the names of the entities investing, I was formally requesting to William the AML and FATCA compliance requirements for them to invest in the fund.
And what was your understanding of why there was an onshore investment entity and an offshore investment entity at this time in May of 2020?
At this time, I was unclear of that.
Go ahead.
Outside of one being a taxable entity and the other one being a non-taxable entity.
And which was the non-taxable entity?
Hamilton Investment Management Limited.
Mr. Finkel said, we can zoom out of that, please. We can go to the first page. Can you read the top email that you sent, please, on May 28, 2020?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Can you read this email that you sent to William J. on May 28, 2020?
Hi, William. We are looking to have all wires and documents in by Friday, June 5th. Thank you for the below confirmation. Sorry. Thank you for the confirmation below. I will have the side letter to you shortly.
What does side letter mean?
A side letter is a legal document that a lot of large investors require. They are terms outside of the offering materials.
And was there a side letter for the Soraka/Miles Kwok investment?
Yes.
And what was the nature of the side letter for the Soraka/Miles Kwok investment?
From a high level, they were requesting 3 terms outside of the offering documents for the fund. The first was they wanted a reduced management fee, from 2% to 1%. They wanted a hurdle on the performance fee. Meaning I believe it was something in the magnitude of they were going to make 25 times their money before we would start charging a performance fee. And then the third is they had requested a transparency clause. meaning they were going to require additional reporting outside of our typical reporting to investors.
All right. Let's walk through that. You said there is a reduction in the, is it management fee?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what that means?
So for the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund Share Class B, there's a one-time 2% management fee taken upon at closing. And so if you were to invest $100 in this share class, the management fee for Hayman to manage this capital would be $2 at the time of closing. So in the case of Soraka and Hamilton's investment, it would only be $1.
So the reduction in the fee, is that beneficial to Soraka and Miles Kwok or to Hayman?
A reduction in the management fee would be beneficial to the investor requesting it, because they are only paying $1 instead of $2.
And can you describe to the jury, please, what the reduction in the performance fee means?
So Hayman collects a performance fee. The performance fee for the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund is first you get your initial capital back. So if you invest $100, you get $100 back. Then, on the next $100 that is made, let's say the trade works out in our favor, we collect 15 cents of every dollar. And you get 85 cents of every dollar, up until 100% net return to you as the investor. So you've made, $200 and you've made $2 and we've collected 15 cents at this point. Then anything above 100% net return to you, we split those $80 to you, 20 to us.
What did the Miles Kwok/Soraka investment seek instead?
They were looking to make 25 times their money. So if they were to invest $1, they would get that dollar back plus $25. And then anything above that we would split the 20/80ths, 80 to them, 20 to us.
And so the terms that Miles Kwok and Soraka requested, are they beneficial to Miles Kwok and Soraka or to Hayman?
Beneficial to Miles Kwok and Soraka.
At this time, Ms. Schottenheimer, May 2020. What was your understanding of the amount of money that Miles Kwok and Soraka sought to invest in the prodigious series?
Originally, it was flagged to me 51 million, including Hamilton. And then at some point when we received the sub-docs, it was 100 million from Soraka.
The last point with respect to the side letter, Ms. Schottenheimer, you mentioned was transparency. Can you explain to the members of the jury, please, what that means?
So we have typical exposure reporting to investors on a monthly basis. We kind of quantify for them, that you are 200 times short the Hong Kong dollar, or you're 196 times short the Hong Kong dollar. In share class B, it doesn't vary month to month until the options expire. But in the case of Soraka, they actually wanted position level detail, which we gave them, because there was no withdrawal rights in this fund. And so once we were fully positioned, we were comfortable giving them position level detail. Which is what the side letter said.
Can you break that down for us, please? What you mean by position level detail, and because this was a fully invested financial product.
Right. So typically, again, we just tell you your exposure. You're short X amount to Hong Kong dollar. They were actually looking for position level detail, meaning the actual description of the option. You are short 200 million, dollars worth of an option that expires on X date.
So they wanted detail about the underlying financial transactions that.
Correct. The actual positions that they hold when they expired. The notional value of each of them. Because, again, you don't just go out and buy a single option for a whole tranche. You are trading with multiple dealers and getting the best pricing possible every night that you're in the marketplace. So you could have dozens of line items or dozens of very similar options. And they were wanting to see that level of detail.
And this level of detail pertains to financial transactions, correct?
Correct.
And these are transactions, these are trades that Hayman makes to put in place a bet that if the peg breaks on the weak side, the bet pays off. Is that right?
Correct.
And did Hayman ultimately agree to the reduction in administrator fee, performance fee, and these transparency rights for Miles Kwok and Soraka?
Reduction in management fee, yes. The reduction in the incentive fee, yes. And the transparency rights.
Who asked for those, by the way?
This was something, to my knowledge, that William negotiated with Kyle.
Ms. Schottenheimer, with respect to Soraka Media Group Incorporated, what, if any, due diligence did Hayman perform on that entity?
Regarding their subscription document.
Yes.
So when Soraka subscribed to Hayman, there was a thorough review of the subscription document by myself, another person that works with me in investor relations, and our third-party administrator. And there was some time spent kind of reconciling the answers, and then inquiring back to William regarding some things that did not align.
And Ms. Schottenheimer, through that process, what did Hayman learn about who, if anyone, was the ultimate beneficial owner of Soraka Media Group?
So Soraka Media Group represented that there was only a single person that owned the entire entity. And they put forth that that individual was Miles Kwok's son.
Mr. Finkel said, "Can you please display what's in evidence as GXHN82? Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this?"
This is a copy of a valid passport at the time of Miles Kwok's son.
And what's his legal name? If you could read it or spell it for the jury, please.
His last name is Guo, and his first name is spelled Qiang.
And why does Hayman collect this passport copy?
It is required as part of our AML practices on any and all beneficial owners more than 25%.
And based on the representations made by Soraka, were there any other owners of Soraka Media Group?
Not based on their subscription booklet.
And Ms. Schottenheimer, if the prodigious series investment, $100 million investment, that Soraka invested and paid off, ultimately, who would collect the gain?
Mr. Kamarju said, objection to form.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Soraka Media Group would collect the wire. And the ultimate beneficial owner of Soraka is Miles's son.
So he would collect the gain?
Through the entity, yes.
Did Miles Kwok go through an AML check?
He did not.
Why not?
Because he was not listed on the subscription booklet as an authorized signatory, an ultimate beneficial owner, or a controlling interest person.
In your work, does the term principal and agent have a particular meaning?
Not in the context of a subscription booklet.
In the context of what?
Can you please repeat the question?
What is a principal?
What is a principal? Someone that is the primary person on in some capacity.
And, Ms. Schottenheimer, if you're understanding that it was Miles Kwok who was investing the Soraka making the Soraka investment, but Miles Kwok's son was the ultimate beneficial owner, can you explain to the jury whether that would be unusual, or why there was no work done on Miles Kwok AML?
Mr. Kamarju said, object to the form.
The court said, if you would break that down, please.
Mr. Finkel said, certainly. You testified earlier that your understanding was Miles Kwok was making the Soraka investment, correct?
Yes.
Why then let me ask it this way. The fact that his son was the ultimate beneficial owner of Soraka, but you understood it was Miles Kwok's money, can you explain what impact, if any, that had on your thinking when doing due diligence?
Mr. Kamarju said, objection to form.
The court said, so take it in small bites.
Mr. Finkel said, sure. The fact that Miles Kwok's son was the ultimate beneficial owner of Soraka, as opposed to Miles Kwok. What impact, if any, did that have on your thinking as you were working through the due diligence of this particular investment?
I didn't find it.
Mr. Kamaraju said, same objection.
The court said, you understood Miles Kwok to be making the investment?
The witness said, I understood that it was Miles Kwok family office that was interested in making the investment.
The court said, you can ask the next question.
Mr. Finkel said, thank you.
By Mr. Finkel.
What do you mean by Miles Kwok's family office?
Previously it had been represented to me that William J.E. was the head or ran Miles Kwok's family office. And so when William J.E. was interested in reviewing our presentation, our playback webcast in reviewing offering documents, I took that to mean that Miles Kwok's family office, the capital that William ran on his behalf, was interested in the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund.
And that Miles Kwok's son was the ultimate beneficial owner of Soraka, as opposed to Miles Kwok. What impact did that have on your thinking about the investment?
Mr. Kamaraju said, same objection.
The court said, you may answer.
It had very little impact on my thinking because it is typical for family offices to have members of the family be the beneficial owners of the entities that they invest in.
Mr. Finkel said, if we can look at what's in evidence as GXHN41. If we can zoom in, please, Ms. Loftus, on the top email. Ms. Schottenheimer, can you read this email from William J.E. to you on May 31st, 2020?
Yes. Dear Steele, thanks. Please see attached the revised side letter. Please ignore the previous one. As discussed with Kyle earlier, in the interest of time, the funds may be transferred to your bank account from a different company from that of the registered investor. Thanks and regards, William.
What was your understanding of what Mr. J meant? The funds may be transferred to your bank account from a company different from that of the registered investor.
So the registered investor was Soraka. Soraka had filled out the subdocs. Soraka was subscribing to the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund. However, in this email, he's highlighting that the funds might be wired from a different account other than Soraka, or different entity other than Soraka.
And is that okay?
No, it is not.
Why not?
Because we wouldn't have had AML on the company that is sending the wire.
Mr. Finkel said, we can zoom out of that, please, Ms. Loftus. And if we can zoom in on the third email, May 29th. Can you read this email from William J.E. to you on May 29th, 2020?
Dear Steele, please see attached our comments of the side letter. We will have one onshore and one offshore vehicle. The onshore one will invest 100 million. And the offshore will invest 1 million. The address of the onshore vehicle is 162 East 64th Street, New York, New York, 10065. United States. Thanks and regards, William.
Ms. Schottenheimer, you testified that the 100 million was from Soraka. What was your understanding of what the $1 million was from at this time in May of 2020?
At this time I believe that I recognized that the 100 million was coming from Miles Kwok's family office. And the $1 million was coming from William J. personally.
What is AML?
Anti-money laundering.
Mr. Finkel said, you can zoom out of that, please, and display for the witness what's been marked for identification as HN43. And if you can zoom in this so Ms. Schottenheimer can just take a look at it. Ms. Schottenheimer, just at a high level, what document is this? What kind of document is this?
This is an email from me to William providing an update kind of on our side. Where we are with the side letter negotiations, the timing of the closing.
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, the government offers HN43.
Mr. Kamaraju said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit HN43 received in evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, and if we can publish that, please.
The court said, "Go ahead."
Mr. Finkel said, Ms. Loftus, can you highlight or zoom in on the last paragraph? Lastly,
By Mr. Finkel.
can you read that, please, Ms. Schottenheimer?
Lastly, the wire needs to come from an account in Soraka Media Group's name. We understand that due to tight timing, this might not be possible. As a solution, you can change the entity making the initial investment to match the wire. And we can transfer and assign the interest to Soraka Media Group as of June 8th, the day of the closing. We will need to do full AML on both entities.
Ms. Schottenheimer, can you please explain to the members of the jury what you were conveying to Mr. J about his request to send the money from a different account?
So as I've previously described, we are under strict AML guidance and requirements. Thus, you cannot subscribe to one of our funds in Investor A name and send a wire from Investor B's account. They have to match. So I am providing a solution to Mr. J. If he can't send a wire from Soraka's account to match the subscription booklet provided, I am suggesting that whatever account has the capital to fund the investment, actually make the investment. So then we would do full AML on that entity. And then after we have closed on, Investor B making this investment, if all of the checks are in place, then we could do something called a transfer and assignment. Meaning we could transfer and assign the interest of Investor B to Soraka as of the date of the closing. But that would be post facto, after Investor B, Entity B, had gone through all the AML checks.
And when you say Investor B would have to go through all the AML checks, you mean filling out the subscription documents, providing ultimate beneficial owner information, that sort of thing?
Yes.
And what ultimately happened? Did they change the name of the entity, or what happened?
They kept the Soraka subscription booklets in place and they sent a wire from a Soraka account.
Mr. Finkel said, we can take that down. And if we can pull up, please, what's in evidence as Government Exhibit GXHN57. By the way, Ms. Schottenheimer, this period at the end of May into June 2020. When you were facilitating this Soraka/Miles Kwok investment, can you describe to the members of the jury the pace of that deal?
There was a lot going on at that time. There was a lot of interest in this new prodigious series. It was a reverse inquiry from one of our largest investor from our flagship fund. And, we introduced this new product to our current investor base. We closed the initial B1 tranche closing on June 1st. And so coinciding with me closing that 172 interested investors that subscribed on June 1st. I was then also coordinating this between Kyle and William, the Soraka and Hamilton investment.
And so as the Managing Director of Investor Relations, the time you were interacting with William J. about the Soraka/Miles Kwok investment, were you also handling other potential investors and managing those investments?
Correct, like close to 200.
Ms. Schottenheimer, this document is dated June 3, 2020, and it's from William J. to you. Could you please read to the jury the first email from Mr. J.
Soraka will subscribe $100 million, and Hamilton will subscribe $1 million in this batch. Please see the attached signature pages of the onshore Soraka fund document you sent earlier, and the relevant KYC documents for your review. Please confirm all is in order, and we will arrange remittance. The offshore Hamilton documents will follow.
Continued on next page. By Mr. Finkel.
And Ms. Schottenheimer, at a high level, what is attached to this email?
These are the subscription documents for Soraka to invest in Hayman Hong Kong Opportunity Onshore Fund Share Class B.
Mr. Finkel said, Ms. Loftus, could we go to page 4 of this document, please? Stop right there. Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this page?
This is the signature page to the subscription booklet.
And who signed for Soraka Media Group Incorporated?
Yangping Wang.
With what title?
President.
What does it say next to total requested capital contributions?
$100 million.
And what does that mean? Total requested capital contributions, layman's terms.
The amount that they are subscribing or investing in the fund.
At this time, June 3, 2020, did you know who Yinping Wang is?
I did not.
Mr. Finkel said, "Could we go to page 6, Ms. Loftus?" Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this page, investor profile?
This is a page of the subscription booklet that collects information on the investor.
Ms. Schottenheimer, underneath the capital contribution, 100 million, or 2 lines below it, what does it say?
2 lines below the capital contribution.
Yes, ma'am.
Briefly identify the subscriber's primary source of wealth.
And why does Hayman collect that information?
This is an AML requirement.
And what information is provided by Soraka about their primary source of wealth?
On their first pass of the subscription document, it was left blank.
And is that acceptable for Hayman's purposes?
No.
And below that, entity investors. It says there's a registered office address in Delaware and a principal place of business on 64th Street in Manhattan. What's the difference between a registered office address and a principal place of business address?
Principal place of business is the primary place where the majority of the business of this entity takes place. The registered office is where the entity was formed and registered.
Mr. Finkel said, "Could we go to page 8, please, Ms. Loftus?" Actually, page 7. Sorry. The bottom, or the second line of page 7, Ms. Schottenheimer, it says, "Total number of equity/capital/ or beneficial owners of the investor." What does that mean?
So this is an entity, and we are trying to understand how many individuals own this entity.
And what's the information provided?
That there is one owner of this entity.
And which entity is this?
Soraka Media Group, Incorporated.
And at this time, what was your understanding of who the one entity or owner of this Soraka Media Group was?
Miles Kwok's son.
Mr. Finkel said, "Ms. Loftus, we can go to page 8 now, please." Sorry about that. Ms. Schottenheimer, what is the information that is being provided on page 8 of HN57?
We need authorized contacts to know who is authorized to receive information regarding this investment. And there is a primary contact and a secondary contact listed.
And who is the primary contact?
Yangping Wang.
And who is the secondary contact?
Max Krasner.
And at this time, Ms. Schottenheimer, did you know who Max Krasner was?
I did not.
In your work at Hayman, is it unusual to see contacts that are different than your understanding of who is the family office investing in a project?
Mr. Kumraju said, "Object to form."
The court said you may answer.
There's an industry term called segregation of duties. And this is a best-in-practice kind of governance over kind of institutional practices. And so it is very common that the person making the investment decisions is different than the authorized signatory on the account. And that is, there's additional contacts receiving information of the investment.
Mr. Finkel said, "We can go to page 11, please, Ms. Loftus." It says here the authorized signatory is Yinping Wang. Similar question. Is it unusual to see an individual as an authorized signatory who is different than the ultimate beneficial owner in the family office?
This is not unusual.
Why not?
Like I previously said, this is segregation of duties. This is kind of more eyes watching the investment, watching over what's going on. And this is very typical for institutional quality investments.
Mr. Finkel said, "If we can go page 29, please, Ms. Loftus." Sorry. page 46. Excuse me. If we can go to page 49. Ms. Schottenheimer, what is this document? Page 49 of HN57.
This is a valid government-issued ID. It's a passport of Yang Ping Wang's passport.
And why is it something that Hayman collected?
As the authorized signatory of Soraka Media Group, we were required to collect this document as part of our AML check.
Mr. Finkel said, could we go to the next page, please, Ms. Loftus? If we can go to page 53. You can take that down. Ms. Schottenheimer, given that the source of wealth information was left blank, what, if anything, did you convey to Mr. G about that?
There was a number of blanks within the subdoc that I needed complete, and so I requested to him to complete the outstanding information.
Mr. Finkel said, if we can pull up, please, HN69. Now separate from the Soraka investment, was Hayman also collecting materials for the Hamilton investment?
Yes.
And what is this document, HN69?
This is the subscription packet that Hamilton is submitting for processing for subscription to Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Offshore Fund.
And was Hamilton going to get the same side letter agreement that Soraka got?
Yes, it was negotiated simultaneously.
Mr. Finkel said, if we can pull up, please, Ms. Loftus HN71. If we can zoom in on the top email, please. Ms. Schottenheimer, this document HN71 is dated June 4, 2020. Can you review it and let the members of the jury know the purpose of you sending this email to Mr. J.E.?
Mr. J.E. had requested countersigned or counter-executed subscription booklets for both Soraka and Hamilton. This is sometimes a practice that in order for a bank to send a wire, they want to see that there's an actual agreement or deal in place for the fund that they are subscribing. There was a handful of outstanding questions on the Soraka document, but none that were AML related. And so we were comfortable signing the subscription booklet with just a handful of outstanding questions to be made.
But when Hayman had signed the subscription booklet, had Soraka provided information about the source of funds?
Yes, they had.
Mr. Finkel said, could we go to page 31 of this document, Ms. Loftus? And can you read, Ms. Schottenheimer? What's below? Briefly identify the subscriber's primary source of wealth.
Selling shares of a subsidiary.
And at this time, do you have any idea what that meant?
Not specifically.
Mr. Finkel said, you can take that down. And if we can go to HN79, which is an evidence. And can you zoom in on the bottom email, please, Ms. Loftus? Ms. Schottenheimer, can you read this email dated June 5, 2020, from you to William J.E.?
Hi, William. I am pleased to report we have received the $100 million wire from Soraka. Please advise on Hamilton's wire at your earliest convenience. Thank you.
And did in fact Hayman receive $100 million from Soraka?
Yes.
And did Hayman later receive the $1 million from Hamilton?
Yes.
By the way, why were you interacting with William J. about the Soraka investment instead of Miles Kwok?
It was my understanding that he ran Mr. Kwok's investment portfolio.
And is that unusual for you to interface with people who work for someone who owns a family office?
Not unusual at all.
Mr. Finkel said, okay. If we can please display what's in evidence as HN80. You can zoom in on the top, please. And who is this email from?
Steve Bannon.
And who is it addressed to?
Kyle Bass.
And can you read what it says?
Congrats on Miles' deal. He thinks you are biggest superstar in finance.
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, at this time the government would like to read a stipulation.
The court said, go ahead.
Mr. Finkel said, this is GX Stip 13. It is hereby stipulated and agreed by the United States of America and Miles Gov't, the defendant, that GXSW101 GXSW150 are emails and their attachments, if any, that were sent or received by the account steve@art-and.com on the dates indicated on the face of the exhibit. And that stipulation is signed by the parties. And at this time, Ms. Loftus, if we could display for the witness what's been marked as GXSW107.
The court said, so you're looking to have that admitted.
Mr. Finkel said, parts of it, yes.
The court said, so is it going to be one by one that you'll?
Mr. Finkel said, we're going to seek to admit 2 of the documents at this time.
The court said, okay.
Mr. Finkel said, as soon as I find them. Your Honor, at this time the government offers GXSW107.
The court said, it is admitted without objection.
Mr. Kamaraju said, no objection, Your Honor.
Government's Exhibit SW107 received in evidence. By Mr. Finkel
and Ms. Schottenheimer. Mr. Finkel said, actually, Ms. Loftus, can you publish that, please? And could you flip through that quickly? We can go to the top. Ms. Schottenheimer, who is this email from, or what email address?
steve@arc-end.com.
And who is it to?
Jack Bannon and Sean Bannon.
And what's attached to it, the name of the attachment?
Saraka Bannon Consulting Agreement version 4 clean, Word doc.
Ms. Schottenheimer, have you seen this document before?
No.
Mr. Finkel said, could we go to the next page? Oh, sorry, Ms. Loftus. Ms. Schottenheimer, can you please read the text of this email?
Jack, print out 2 copies of this agreement for me.
Ms. Schottenheimer. Mr. Finkel said, can you go to the next page, please? And Ms. Schottenheimer, can you read the top in bold?
This consulting agreement is made effective as of October 1, 2019, the effective date by and between Saraka Media Group, Inc., a company incorporated in the state of Delaware, Gov't Media, or the company, and Bannon Strategic Advisors, Incorporated, the consultant individually, a party, collectively. The parties, in consideration of the mutual covenants set forth, and upon other good and valuable consideration. The parties agree as follows.
Mr. Finkel said, Ms. Loftus, can you scroll down to paragraph 4? And Ms. Schottenheimer, can you read paragraph 4?
As full compensation for the services and rights granted to the company in this agreement. Company agrees to pay consultant an annual fee of $1 million, the consulting fee, paid quarterly, i.e. every 3 months, in the amount of $250,000 and payable in advance. Which consulting fee is fully earned on the date hereof. The first $250,000 shall be due on signing of this agreement. Consultant shall be entitled to reimburse for any company prepaid costs and expenses incurred in connection with the services rendered under this agreement.
Mr. Finkel said, and if we can pull up, please, for the witness GXSW 108. And at this time, the government offers GXSW 108.
The court said, without objection?
Mr. Kamaraju said, I'm just waiting for it to come up on the screen, Your Honor. No objection, Your Honor.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit SW108 received in evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, could we publish that, please, Ms. Loftus?
By Mr. Finkel.
Ms. Schottenheimer, have you seen this document before?
No.
Can you read the bottom of it? It says on October 1st, 2019?
At 1:17 p.m.
Yes.
Jack, print out 2 copies of this agreement for me.
And who sent that?
Steve Bannon.
Mr. Finkel said, okay. If we can scroll to the top, please, Ms. Loftus. And this email from Sean Bannon to Jack Bannon copying Steve Bannon, Ms. Schottenheimer. Can you read the text of it?
2 copies of Gov't contract in envelope along with a contract Grace needs your wet signature on.
Mr. Finkel said, we can take that down. And Ms. Schottenheimer, for Soraka, ultimately did the AML KYC checks go through?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, if you can please display what's in evidence as GXHN220. Ms. Schottenheimer, do you recognize this sort of email?
Yes.
What is it?
It is an email from the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund's third-party administrator SEI. SEI sets up all authorized contacts on their portal for access to the investor-level documents available, such as tax documents like AK1 or the monthly capital statements.
And who was this email sent to?
The authorized signatory and contact on the Soraka account, Yvette Wang.
Mr. Finkel said, take that down, please. And if we can please pull up what's in evidence as HN124. Do you recognize this document, Ms. Schottenheimer?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what HN124 is?
It's an email between William and I. I had received a strange email from a strange email address asking that. Need to verify that if Carl Bass was one of the directors of Soraka Media Group. So I cut and paste this strange email that I've got, had received, to William, and I say, Hi William. I am going to ignore the below unless otherwise directed by you. In which he responds, please ignore the email as most of these are scams. Thanks.
Mr. Finkel said, we can take that down. Ms. Schottenheimer, I want to direct your attention to July 13, 2020. What, if anything, happened with respect to the Soraka investment on that date?
Hayman received a call from outside counsel, our lawyer, that they had received a letter from the SEC for a documentation request regarding Soraka's investment in the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund.
What was the name of that attorney?
Kit Adelman.
And what firm does Ms. Adelman work at?
Haynes and Boone.
And how is it that you remember that particular date, July 13, 2020?
It was my mom's 70th birthday, and I was supposed to cook dinner.
Did you cook her dinner?
At like 9 p.m.
Why was it so delayed?
There was a lot of calls, internally at Hayman and with external counsel.
About what general topic matter?
About Soraka's investment in the Hayman Fund and this document request that we had received.
And what sort of documents was the SEC requesting from Hayman?
Mr. Kamarju said, objection to form, Your Honor.
The court said, did they request any documents?
They requested a number of documents.
What kind of documents did the SEC request?
The ones that I had to run point on gathering was the subscription documents.
Subscription documents of what?
Of Soraka investing in the Hong Kong Fund, AML, that went along with it.
And upon receiving this request for documents from the SEC, after that, what, if any, steps did Hayman take as a result of this notification?
At this point, we were being advised by external counsel, and they were running point on the process. But as a next step, my recollection was that we segregated the Soraka investment in its own tranche so it wasn't commingled with any other investors. So Soraka stayed in B2 and the other investors we moved out to different tranches, and then we, from there, had $30 million of the $100 million had been invested in options shorting the Hong Kong dollar. And then we had roughly $7 million, $70 million that was still in cash. And we kind of segregated these two buckets of the Soraka investment because it had been brought to our attention that $70 million of the $100 million was potentially not from Soraka.
Did Hayman's attorneys contact Soraka?
Yes. Yes. HN 168.
Mr. Kamarju said, objection to form.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Mr. Finkel said, if we can display what's in evidence, as if you can zoom in at the top through the kit Adelman. Yup. What is the date of this email, Ms. Schottenheimer?
Wednesday, July 15th.
What is the text of it?
Please see the attached letter requiring your prompt attention. Thank you, Kit Adelman.
And who, if anyone, did Ms. Adelman send this email to?
William J. Max K., Yvette Wang, Aaron at lmessiasq.com.
Mr. Finkel said, zoom out of that, and let's go to the next page, please. And Ms. Schottenheimer, what was your understanding of why Ms. Adelman sent this letter to William J. Max Krasner, Yvette Wang, and Aaron Mitchell?
We were trying to understand where the source of funds came for the Soraka investment. And we were trying to understand what to do with the investment going forward.
Can you read the first paragraph of this letter?
Haynes and Boone LLP represents Hayman Capital Management and Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Onshore Fund. We have been contacted by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission related to an investigation of a securities offering by GTV Media Group entitled In the Matter of G-Coins, NY 10256. As a result, we require your immediate attention and additional information.
And at this time, Ms. Schottenheimer, July 15, 2020, what was your understanding of what GTV Media Group was?
It was an entity run and operated by Miles Kwok.
And what was your understanding of what G-Coins was?
It was an offering that GTV was. It was a private placement offering that GTV Media Group offered. Presented.
What's a private placement?
A private placement is a private fund that is not offered on an exchange.
Can you read the next paragraph?
As the general partner to the fund and in the performance of its continuing due diligence and compliance with the securities laws, Hayman requires your response to the following.
Can you read the first question?
What was the source of capital used by Soraka Media Group to invest in the fund?
Can you read the next question?
The fund's subscription agreement the fund's subscription agreement completed on behalf of Soraka listed the company's primary source of wealth as selling shares of subsidiary. What subsidiary is this statement referring to? When were the shares of the subsidiary acquired? And when were the shares sold?
Could you read the next one?
If the proceeds were derived from a securities offering, did the offering documents disclose the use of proceeds to include an investment in the fund or in any similar private vehicle? If yes, please provide a copy of the disclosure document.
Can you read the next one?
Was any of the money raised in GTV's primary offering of shares used to fund Soraka's investment in the fund?
And the next one?
For the primary offering funds raised by GTV, into what banks were the proceeds deposited and what was the balance in those accounts as of July 9, 2020?
Ms. Schottenheimer, did anyone from Soraka Media respond to these questions?
No.
The third question, it says, if the proceeds were derived from a securities offering, did the offering documents disclose the use of proceeds to include an investment in the fund or in any similar private fund vehicle? What is your understanding of what offering documents means?
Well, a private placement is something that an investor subscribes to. And you have to offer them the interest or the option to invest in the fund. So there would be offering documents, just like we have offering documents for the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund.
Mr. Finkel said, can you zoom out, Ms. Loftus, and go to the next page, please? Can you read the second sentence of the first paragraph?
Thank you for your prompt assistance in this matter. If you have questions regarding this request, please contact me at this email address and phone number below.
And above that it says, however, to remain an investor in the fund, we require responses to the above questions by 9 a.m. Central Time on Friday, July 17th.
Yes.
Were those responses provided?
They were not.
Did Hayman receive any response after dispatching this letter?
Mr. Cumraju said, "Objection, Your Honor."
Mr. Finkel said, "I can rephrase. What, if any, response did Hayman receive after dispatching this letter?"
No formal responses to this letter.
What about informal responses?
It's my understanding that Kyle and William had connected over the phone.
And what is your understanding of what that communication was?
Mr. Cumraju said, "Objection. Hearsay."
The court said, "If you'll step up, please."
At the sidebar,
The court said, "So for what purpose are you eliciting these out-of-court statements?"
Mr. Finkel said, "So there are 2 points to it. One, Your Honor, it's a statement of William J., which is a co-conspirator statement, and second, it's being offered to show the effect on the listener, which here is Ms. Schottenheimer, because it informs what she and others at Hayman subsequently did with respect to the Soraka investment."
The court said, "The objection is overruled."
continued on next page. In open court,
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer."
Can you please repeat the question?
What was your understanding of what was conveyed to Mr. Bass by Mr. J.E.?
That there was a misunderstanding. There might have been some money borrowed, but they were going to put it back, and to keep investing the money. And they wanted to stay invested in the Hayman Capital Hong Kong Fund.
I'm sorry.
The Hayman Capital Hong Kong Fund.
Was that explanation sufficient for Hayman?
No.
Mr. Finkel said, "If we can please display what's in evidence as HN 193. If you can zoom in on this. This is a document from, this is an email from William J.E. to Kyle Bass. Is that correct?"
Yes.
July 24th, 2020?
Yes.
Can you read what William J.E. told Mr. Bass?
Dear Kyle, how are you? Soraka has asked me to inform you that their investments into your fund is valid and approved by your fund previously. Soraka does not agree for any refund of the money to Soraka, or your fund may need to bear any consequences of such refund, including any economic consequences. Thanks and best regards, William.
Was Hayman contemplating ejecting Soraka from the HHKOF at this time?
Yes.
Why was that?
Because it had been brought to our attention that the funds for the investment might not have come from Soraka.
Mr. Finkel said, "If we can please pull up what's in evidence as HN 221. Ms. Schottenheimer, do you recognize this document?"
Yes.
Could you explain to the jury what this email is?
This is our lawyer, Kit Adelman, sending notice to Soraka and its counsel that Hayman, as the general partner of the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Onshore Fund, is exercising its right to make a mandatory withdrawal of $70 million of the investment made by Soraka Media Group.
And what does that mean, if you can explain to the jury, of a mandatory withdrawal of $70 million?
The GP of the fund, the general partner of the fund, reserves the right to exercise its ability to do a mandatory withdrawal of an investor.
And what's mandatory withdrawal?
Forcing them to. It's a forced redemption to return the capital of an investor's money.
Mr. Finkel said, "If we can please display what's in evidence as HN 208. And Your Honor, this is the document that requires the instruction."
The court said, "All right. So the document that you're about to see, if you'll just enlarge it for me, is an email from Kyle Bass to William J.E. It's not being offered for the truth of what is being stated in the email. It's being offered merely for its effect on the recipient. You may proceed."
Mr. Finkel said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
by Mr. Finkel.
Ms. Schottenheimer, is this an email that you reviewed before it was sent?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
I think it was a team effort to review the accuracy of this email before Kyle sent it to William.
And what's the date of this email?
August 22nd of 2020.
And prior to this email being sent by Mr. Bass to Mr. J.E., Aside from that phone conversation you mentioned, had Hayman or its attorneys received any responses to the questions that Ms. Adelman had posed about the source of the funds for the $100 million Soraka investment?
No response.
Can you read this document, please?
Me?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. William. Given the unfortunate government investigations that surround Soraka's investment with the Hayman Hong Kong Fund, I am writing today to inquire about your signature on the attached document sent to you and the Soraka team on July 31st. Since we first received notice of the investigations in mid-July, our lawyers have been in frequent contact with federal authorities regarding this investment and have spoken repeatedly with counsel to Soraka and GTV. Based on those discussions, through which Hayman learned information regarding the source of funds for some of Soraka's investment in the fund, and which had not been previously disclosed, Hayman was compelled to act responsibly and redeem $70 million of Soraka's initial $100 million investment. Hayman will not be collecting any management fees from the entire $100 million investment. As we stated in the letter, we will retain our actual legal fees incurred in this matter. In our last phone conversation on August 3rd, you confirmed that you would have the attached letter signed and returned to me promptly. To this day, I have not received your signature on the document. Please have it executed and send it to me as soon as possible.
Pause right there. And so in that piece of the letter to William J., it says that Hayman was compelled to act responsibly and redeem $70 million of Soraka's initial $100 million investment. What does that mean, redeem?
So this is the mandatory withdrawal that Hayman exercised, or the GP of the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund exercised. And so in speaking with federal authorities and counsel for Soraka and GTV, it became evident that this $70 million was not from in fact Soraka, as rep to us in the subscription document. And so therefore, we were wanting to divest the amount from the fund and put it in an escrow account. Until further instruction.
And if you can keep reading?
The next item to be addressed relates to the remaining $30 million, part of the 100, initially invested into the Hayman Hong Kong Fund. In order to allow Soraka to remain invested in the fund, Hayman needs to receive a representation from you and Soraka's lawyers regarding the specific source of this money,
beyond what was initially provided stated in the subscription documents, and that this money is not tainted in any way, including that it does not represent assets from the GTV offering but that it is a bona fide investment made by Soraka and Miles.
Pause right there. Now where it says a bona fide investment made by Soraka and Miles, what does Miles mean?
Miles Kwok.
Keep going.
Moreover, we expect you or your lawyers to confirm that the source of this portion of Soraka's investment has been discussed with the federal authorities, and that they have no objection to the continuation of that portion of the investment being managed in the fund. We have been asking for clarification regarding this information since July 15th.
Letter from counsel also attached, and need the information and representations from you or your lawyers by the end of next week for us to continue managing this investment on Soraka's behalf.
Keep going.
Please discuss this with Miles and respond to me as soon as possible. We need resolution on the remaining $30 million investment by August 28th. I will be available to you at any time you wish to speak about this, and I would like to find a resolution that everyone, including the U.S. government prosecutors, agrees upon.
Ms. Schottenheimer, did the federal authorities direct Hayman to send this email?
No.
Okay. Did Hayman receive a response to this email?
No.
Did Soraka provide a representation from itself or its lawyers regarding the specific source of money?
No.
Was there any representation made that the money invested in the Hong Kong Opportunities Fund was not tainted in any way?
No.
Was there any representation made that that money was not from assets from a GTE offering?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Was there any representation made by Soraka or its counsel that the $100 million investment in the Hong Kong Opportunities Fund Prodigious Series was a bona fide investment made by Soraka and Miles Kwok?
No.
Mr. Finkel said, "You can zoom out of that and go to the next page." Ms. Schottenheimer, do you recall what documents were attached to this email?
The letter Kit Adelman sent on July 15 inquiring about the source of funds of the Soraka Media Group investment, and also the withdrawal notice that she had sent on July 31 as well.
And what's the withdrawal notice mean?
That was the letter that we sent to Soraka notifying them of the mandatory withdrawal of the $70 million.
Mr. Finkel said, "Okay. You can take that down, Ms. Loftus." Now, Ms. Schottenheimer, the $30 million that was left because it was already invested in options. What happened to that $30 million?
To clarify, the $30 million.
Let me ask the question this way. Soraka made a $100 million investment in the Prodigious series. What happened to that $100 million?
70 of that was segregated, and we moved it into a feeder fund account until an agreed-upon escrow account was put in place. The remaining $30 million, to our knowledge, was potentially a bona fide investment. We had no evidence otherwise. And so we kept it invested in the fund through September-October time frame of 2021.
And what happened to the value of that $30 million?
Well, because it is a capital exhaustion fund, as marketed in the presentation, and it is an options-based strategy, the value of the options, as they became closer to the expiration date, declined dramatically, so that $30 million investment, when it was put to work back in kind of June of 2020, 15 months later, when we liquidated it in the marketplace, it was worth about $380,000.
So how much money was lost, approximately?
Approximately $29.6 million.
And Ms. Schottenheimer, when an investor invested in the Prodigious series, if they want to pull their money out 6 months after investing or 12 months after investing, are they allowed to do that?
No, they are not. There's no withdrawal rights for the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund's share Class B.
And the $70 million that was segregated, what ultimately happened to that money?
It sat in our feeder account, the onshore feeder account, for about a year, and in July of 2021. All interested parties did not object to it going to an escrow account in the name of Soraka's lawyers. It was an account in Soraka's lawyer's name.
When you say interested parties, who is that?
The government authorities involved, DOJ, SEC, and then Soraka's lawyers didn't object to it. So Soraka.
Mr. Finkel said, "If we can please display what's in evidence as Government Exhibits 222 and, HN 222 and HN 223. Ms. Schottenheimer, do you recognize these documents, HN 222 and 223?
Yes.
What are they?
These are wire confirmations.
For what?
The one on the left is a wire confirmation from July 7 from the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities onshore fund wiring money from its account to a JP Morgan account in the name of Morvillo Abramowitz, Grand Earson, and Associates.
What's the amount of that wire?
$69,331,019.48.
And what is your understanding of what Morvillo is?
It's my understanding that this is Soraka's counsel at the time of the wire.
And Ms. Schottenheimer, do you know what happened, if anything, to that $69.3 million after Hayman sent it to Morvillo's escrow account?
I do not.
And the document on the right, HN 223, what is that?
This is a second wire from Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities onshore fund dated October 15. The wire is coming from our onshore feeder, account. Being sent to a JP Morgan account in the name of Morvillo Abramowitz Grand Earson and Associates. It's in the amount of $382,558.58.
And do you know what happened to that $382,000 after Hayman transferred it to the Morvillo account?
I do not.
And this $382,000 and change, does that represent what was remaining of the $30 million?
That's correct, the liquidation of the $30 million.
Ms. Schottenheimer, you mentioned a moment ago that once money is invested in the prodigious series, it can't be withdrawn by an investor. Why is that?
Because of it's an industry term. It's called faded decay of the option, meaning that this is an options-based strategy and there is dramatic loss of the value of the option immediately after investment. And so this is a buy and hold strategy. You invest an amount that you are comfortable with losing. If the Hong Kong dollar does not trade outside of the weak side of the band within the time horizon of these options. So for every tranche that closes, we have a target date that all the options expire.
What do you mean by comfortable with losing?
This is a very high risk, potentially high reward strategy. And it is very plausible that all of the options could expire worthless, and the Hong Kong dollar. This 40-year peg stays within the band during the duration of your investment. And so all investors need to be prepared to lose whatever amount they are investing cause this is to be used as a hedge to their overall portfolio, or a small kind of opportunistic potentially repricing of this risk.
Mr. Finkel said, "Thank you, Ms. Schottenheimer. No further questions at this time."
The court said, cross-examination.
Mr. Kumraju said, yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Cross-examination.
By Mr. Kumraju.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So you have now been with Hayman in one form or the other for almost 20 years, right?
Correct.
You started as an intern in 2005, correct?
I started as an intern at Legg Mason, but under Kyle in 2005.
Got it. And then you started at Hayman the following year?
April of 2006, yes.
Okay. And you mentioned Kyle. That's Kyle Bass, right?
Yes, Kyle Bass.
Okay. And Mr. Bass is Hayman's Chief Investment Officer, right?
Founder and Chief Investment Officer.
All right. So fair to say he decides sort of the ultimate investment strategies for the fund?
Yes.
And you testified I think on direct that Hayman is regulated by the SEC, correct?
At the time in question, June of 2020. Hayman was a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Okay. And that subsequently changed, right?
Yes.
And I believe, let's just focus on the time in question for right now. You testified that at that time Hayman could only take in money from certain kinds of investors, right?
Correct.
Qualified purchasers, basically, right?
Yes. We only offered 3C7 funds at the time.
And the definition of a qualified investor that you gave on direct. It's fair to say it's basically about income level or assets that the investor has?
Specifically for qualified purchaser, it's $5 million in marketable securities.
Okay. And an accredited investor is a similar concept, right?
Correct, a similar threshold but lower.
Got it. You just need more, less in assets, right?
Correct.
Now Hayman also has, for some of its funds, at least, a minimum investment amount, right?
Yes, a stated minimum, yes.
So for the prodigious fund I think that was around $25,000, right?
For the onshore feeder fund, yes.
Okay. Thank you. You're going to have to explain onshore and offshore to me in a little bit. But for right now, onshore fund, right? And so is it fair to say that there's a distinction between the accredited investor standard and the minimum investment standard, right?
So we don't manage any 3C1 funds or accredited funds.
Okay. Well, let's do it with the qualified purchaser, all right?
Correct.
There's a distinction between the qualified purchaser and the minimum investment amount, right?
Correct. Those are two separate things.
Right. The qualified purchaser is about the qualities of the investor, right?
Correct.
And the minimum investment amount is about the qualities of the investment, right? Amount, basically.
Mr. Finkel said, object to form.
The court said you may answer.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So the minimum amount threshold is about the amount of the investment, right?
Yes, it's set by the GP.
And the minimum investment amount can be in some circumstances waived, right?
Yes.
But the qualified purchaser threshold, that cannot be waived, right?
Unless you are a knowledgeable employee.
Right.
That works for Hayman. So it's one of the things, but yes. For external investor, there is no exceptions for being a qualified purchaser.
Got it. And I think you testified on direct that the way Hayman learned that somebody is a qualified purchaser is through a representation by the potential investor. Right?
If it's someone that comes in as a reverse inquiry that we don't know, that is the case, yes. If it's the University of Chicago, I can look up that they manage $9 billion under assets under their website, then no.
Right. But that verification that you mentioned, that's not required of Hayman, right?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Hayman, I'll rephrase it. Maybe it will be better. Hayman is not required to confirm the accuracy of a qualified purchaser representation, correct?
Once the representation is made, we are not required to look at bank statements or any further verification.
Okay. And so that's the same with Soraka, just like any other investor, right?
Pertaining to the subdocs.
Yeah, at the time it was making the investment.
Yeah, we take the representatives on the subdocs as is.
So as part of your, I'm going to call it the qualification process, is that all right, just to?
Okay.
So as part of the qualification process for Soraka, Hayman never had to ask for any bank account statements, right?
Correct.
Never any sort of net worth statements, right?
Correct.
No list of assets, right?
Not required.
Okay. And it's not required, so you didn't ask Mr. J.E. for any of that stuff, right?
Correct.
And that was true from the time that you first got the qualified purchaser representation from Mr. J.E. all the way through when the money came in. Right?
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. I'm just trying to get at that period of time between when.
Did you say a number of days?
Yeah, just a few days, whatever it was, right?
Right.
But that period, whenever the qualified purchaser representation was made and the wire came in, there was no point in that period where you asked for the Soraka bank statements or any confirmation, right?
Correct.
And you're not required to, right?
That is correct.
And now you testified earlier that you recognized Mr. Guo in the courtroom, correct?
I believe I was not able to answer that question, to my recollection.
That's fine. You met him first in Texas, right?
I've met Mr. Yes, I met Miles one time in Texas.
All right. He was pleasant to you when you met him?
Very pleasant.
Down to earth?
Very.
And he was there to do an interview with Mr. Bass, right?
Yes.
Do you know if that interview was pre-planned?
Yes. The Real Vision team was there recording, and it was planned.
Okay. And it happened in an airport hangar, right?
Yes.
Now it happened in an airport hangar because there were security concerns, right?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you know why it happened in the hangar?
Not specifically, no.
And that interview happened, right? It was a real vision interview.
It did.
And you were there for the whole interview?
I was.
And you were asked on direct to interpret what, some things that Mr. Bass and Mr. Guo were talking about. Right?
Yes.
Right. The prosecutor played some clips and asked you what you thought.
Of the final interview, yes, that was aired. Just for clarification. There was a full filming team there, and I was out of the frame, and so I couldn't hear live every single word that was said in the interview. I watched the interview post facto once it was actually published.
Oh, I got it. So you were able to sort of see the complete interview after it was released, is that?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Got it. And those were the clips that Mr. Finkel was asking you to interpret, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now it's fair to say that during that interview Mr. Guo wasn't exactly fluent in English, right?
Correct. He brought an interpreter with him.
Right. He even made a joke about trying to use something he called Chinglish, right?
Mr. Finkel said, objection.
The court said, "You may answer if you know."
I don't recall that joke.
You said he brought a translator. That was Mr. J.E., right?
Correct.
And Mr. J.E. did step in to translate from time to time, right?
That is my recollection, yes.
And you testified on direct that despite the language barrier, they were discussing certain aspects of the Chinese economy, right?
Yes.
And there was a graph that was displayed during the interview, do you remember that?
Yes.
And you testified that Mr. Guo's team supplied that graph, right?
Yes.
Who was it on Mr. Guo's team that supplied that graph?
The graph was supplied to Kyle and so I don't know.
Okay. So you don't have any personal knowledge that Mr. Guo's team submitted it to Mr. Bass, right?
Correct.
But you did testify that subsequent to that, Hayman actually included that graph in one of its presentations, right?
Yes.
And that's an investor presentation, correct?
Yes.
So Hayman was comfortable enough with the information in the graph to disclose it to its potential investors. Right?
Yes, with the source of Guo Media.
So you listed the source was Guo Media, right?
That's my recollection.
Okay. But if you had thought the numbers were totally bogus, you wouldn't have sent them out to your investors, right?
Correct.
Now you also testified that Hayman engages in, I think you described it as an event-driven investment strategy. Right?
Global event-driven investing, yes.
Okay. And I think in response to the court's question, you gave an example of devaluing currency, right?
That would be a catalyst or an event, yes.
So is it fair to say that it's basically making an investment around something the fund considers to be a significant event?
I don't know if the word significant is always appropriate, but just an event.
Okay. An event that the fund thinks is worth trading around, right?
When you say fund, what fund are you speaking of?
I'm talking about Hayman.
Hayman, yeah. So if we have a, could you please repeat the question?
Mr. Kumraju said, could we have it read back, please, or I'll get it wrong.
The court said, "Go ahead."
Record read.
So we would invest in securities that we tied to an event-driven thesis, yes.
Okay. So the underlying event, that could be in the US or it could be abroad, right? Hayman does both.
It had a global focus. We have a global focus.
But Hayman has made investments based on events in the United States, right?
Yes.
So for example, in 2008, Hayman made an investment based on the subprime mortgage market, correct?
Correct.
And so in essence, you made an investment that the market would go down, right?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, object to the relevance and scope.
The court said, "Could you step up, please?"
Continued on next page. At the sidebar,
The court said, "Why are you asking about subprime mortgages in 2008?
Mr. Kamraju said, oh. I'm just trying to establish, I was just trying to help explain what an event-driven investment thesis is. Which is they're playing against the Hong Kong dollar. I have no more questions about this. I don't intend to delve any further into the 2008 subprime mortgages. That was it."
The court said, "All right. I'll allow the question."
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, if I may.
The court said yes.
Mr. Finkel said, I think defense counsel has gone far enough. The 2008 investment was an investment that there would be a housing crisis, which is to say that Hayman profited when there was a housing crisis. 2008 is about 12 years before the events that are relevant here. And it's already been elicited that they made domestic investments. That's relevant. And I didn't object to that question. To go any further into the investment in the housing market, it appears, Your Honor, it's designed in part to portray Hayman in a negative light because they invested in the housing crisis, which is irrelevant, so I would ask the objection be sustained. What needs to be elicited has already been elicited, and we shouldn't go any further because it has no proper purpose before the jury.
The court said, "I don't agree. I think that it is appropriate to give an example of a past investment. So the objection is overruled."
continued on next page. In open court,
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer."
Mr. Kamraju said, would you mind just reading back the question, please?
record read. By Mr. Kamraju.
Now on direct you spent some time talking about something called the Prodigious Fund, right?
Yes.
Okay. And without getting too granular at the moment. Sort of the event that was triggering for the Prodigious Fund was some activity related to the Hong Kong dollar. Fair enough.
Yes.
And specifically, the idea is that the peg between the Hong Kong dollar and the US dollar would break at some point, right?
On the weak side, yes.
Right. On the weak side, because if it breaks the other way, the fund loses money, right?
Correct.
So you testified on direct, I believe, that there's something called the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Right?
Yes.
Sometimes called.
HKMA.
Yes. Thank you. And it has a role to play in maintaining the peg, right?
Yes.
So it maintains US dollars reserves, right?
It holds US dollars on its balance sheet, yes.
Okay. And if I understood your testimony, please correct me if I have it wrong. But, the HKMA can use those reserves to step in to keep the peg in place, right?
The excess reserves, yes.
Okay. And the whole concept of the peg is to keep the Hong Kong dollar tied to a band with the US dollar, right?
Yes.
And I think you testified that if the HKMA ran out of its excess reserves, then that could lead the peg to break, right?
Likely.
It likely would lead it to break, right?
Yes.
And do you remember testifying on direct that Mr. Bass expressed the opinion in the Real Vision interview that the HKMA had already spent 78% of its excess reserves?
Yes.
And I think you testified further that if the peg broke, then, and I believe this is your phrase, the market would call out Hong Kong, right?
So the market could call out Hong Kong prior to the Hong Kong Monetary Authority actually running out of reserves, in anticipation that they would.
Right. So basically the fear that they might could cause the market to call out Hong Kong.
Could cause the Hong Kong dollar to trade outside of the band, even prior to the HKMA running out of officially running out of reserves.
Got it. And just to try to put it in layman's terms, right? The phrase, call out the market, that's another way of saying there would be a loss of confidence in the Hong Kong economy. Right?
In the Hong Kong dollar pegged to the US dollar, is where the loss of confidence would be.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So just to be clear for the record. The loss of confidence would be specific to the Hong Kong dollar in this instance.
Hong Kong dollar's ability to maintain the peg.
And I think on direct you testified that Hayman's view was that the peg no longer made sense when I think you were using the phrase HHKOF. Right? When HHKOF was started, Hayman's view was that the peg didn't make sense anymore, right?
Correct.
And that at some point in the future, it would break, right?
That it would likely break, yes.
Okay. That's the investment thesis, fair enough.
Correct. Or more broadly, that the optionality is just mispriced, it's too cheap.
Right. And I'm not an expert, so I'm going to try. But basically that it makes financial or economic sense to buy the option at that price, right?
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, I just object to the commentary. It should just be questions to the witness.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. That at that point in time, it made economic sense to buy the option at that price.
It would depend on what your investment objectives are. What kind of exposures you have in your portfolio, but as a global event-driven investor. It made sense for Kyle and the Hayman vehicles to invest in this strategy, in this mispriced strategy.
Mr. Kamraju said, Your Honor, I don't know if you intended to break for lunch now or you want me to keep going. It's up to you.
The court said, It's 11:29 and we will have our break. Remember that you're not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourself, or with anyone else. Don't permit anyone to discuss the case in your presence. Also remember that you're not permitted to do any research about the case by any means, and you're not permitted to read any news coverage of the case. So be ready to walk back into the courtroom at noon.
The law clerk said, jury exiting.
The court said, and you may step down. Remember not to discuss the case.
The witness said, Yes, Your Honor. Jury not present.
The court said, Do the parties have anything before we return at noon? Oh, the witness needs to step out.
Mr. Finkel said, The government does not.
Mr. Kamraju said, Nor do we, Your Honor.
The court said, All righty.
Mr. Kamraju said, Thank you.
The court said yes.
Lunch and recess.